Good day everyone, this is Regine Pelaez from Bachelor of Culture and Arts Education. We are now in the Chapter 4, Evaluating the Curriculum. And today, I will discuss Lesson 5.2, which is Curriculum Evaluation through Learning Assessment. But before I start, here are the learning outcomes that you should achieve after the discussion. The first one is, learners explain how a curriculum can be evaluated through the assessment of learning outcomes. Identify the levels of learning outcomes with the appropriate assessment tools. Match the levels of learning outcomes with the appropriate assessment tools. And interpret the value of assessment in terms of grades assigned. We have gone a long way in understanding, interpreting, and applying the concept of curriculum development. We will continue to understand that curriculum can be evaluated right in the teacher's classroom. Finding out if the planned, written, implemented curriculum are functioning as intended in the assessment of learning is very crucial. How does a teacher know that the students have learned from what has been taught? The teacher cannot claim that he or she has taught if the students have not learned anything. In this lesson, we will find out that assessment of learning is an evaluation process that tells whether the intended learning outcomes through the teaching learning process have been converted into achieved learning outcomes. We will also find out that learning outcomes can be measured through the use of different assessment tools. The first content of today's lesson is the Philippine Qualification Framework, or PQF. PQF is a reference system of national standards of what qualifications one has earned by education and training in the Philippines. It specifies what an individual has learned in and out of formal schooling based on qualification, levels and degree of competencies on knowledge, skills, applications, values, and degree of independence. A person is deemed qualified if he or she achieved the specific learning outcomes necessary for the academic, work, and community requirements for which an official qualification recognition shall be conferred. This is according to Republic Act 10968, Series of 2018. This is the diagram of the Philippine Qualification Framework, detailing the levels from basic education to higher education in the Philippine educational system. The Philippine Qualifications Framework describes the level of educational qualifications and sets the standards for qualification outcomes. It is a quality-assured national system for development, recognition, and award of qualifications based on standard of knowledge, skills and values acquired in different ways and methods by learners and workers of the country. PQF is divided into 8 levels, level 1 to level 8. The first level is to be achieved by grade 12 graduates who can be awarded a National Certification 1 or NC1 if qualified by the TESDA. Note that level 2 is NC2, level 3 is for NC3, level 4 is for NC4, and level 5 will be certified by the TESDA or CHED in their respective programs. Other students, after graduating from high school, are unable to attend college or prefer to work immediately, so they enroll in TESDA rather than a 4-year college program. The other levels of qualifications progress along the educational ladder in the Philippine educational system from grade 12 in basic education to higher education from baccalaureate to doctoral and postdoctoral levels. In all the 8 levels, the individual is expected to achieve specific standards and competencies that are clustered in 3 domains, which are 1. Knowledge, skills, and values, 2. Application, and 3. Degree of independence and responsibility. The following are the levels and competency descriptors required for each level for basic and higher education levels. The first domain, which is knowledge, skills, and values, the grade 12 that is in the PQF1 level should have the following competencies. First, possess functional knowledge across range of learning areas and technical skills in chosen career tracks, with advanced competencies in communication, scientific, critical and creative thinking, and use of technologies. And the second one is understanding of right or wrong, one's history and cultural heritage, deep respect of self and others. In baccalaureate degree, possess broad and coherent knowledge in field of discipline or profession. In master's degree, possess broad and deep knowledge in the field of discipline or profession. And in doctoral and postdoctoral degree, generate knowledge, skills with established values in the discipline or profession. In the second domain, which is the application, grade 12 graduates should possess the following: apply functional knowledge, technical skills and values in academic and real-life situations through sound reasoning, informed decision-making, and judicious use of resources. In baccalaureate degree, apply knowledge, skills, and values in the professional work. In master's degree, apply knowledge, skills, and values in the professional work and research. In doctoral and postdoctoral degree, apply in professional work and research as a leader initiator. Lastly, degree of independence, which grade 12 graduates should apply skills in varied situations with minimal supervision. And those who have a baccalaureate degree should work independently alone or in teams. In master's degree, they work independently. And those who have doctoral and postdoctoral degree are highly independent in work, initiate and lead, and initiate others. Let us proceed to our next content focus, matching the competencies and outcomes with the PQF by doing learning assessment. The mastery of the learning outcomes in terms of knowledge, process, and understanding performances are measured in formal education, starting with basic education. The measurement is often referred to as assessment. In 2012, DepEd issued Department Order Number 73, which is the K-12 grading system. It is known as the KPUP grading system. It stands for knowledge, process, understanding, and performance. If you recall, this is how our teachers graded us in high school. When we were checking our papers after the exam, I noticed that each part of the test has its own classification, such as KPUP, based on the type of test. And for further understanding, let us look at how the KPUP is calibrated in the different levels, with level 1 as the lowest and level 4 as the highest level for use in formative assessment. This table shows the description of the different learning outcomes and the sample guide questions for learning assessment. The level 1, which is the knowledge, is described as factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, and metacognition. And for the sample guide question, what do you want your students to know in terms of facts, concepts, procedure, and multiple thinking? For example, parts of the body. Is the sky blue? How to dissect a frog? Describe a typhoon. So these are the examples of questions or test items used to assess the learning of the students in terms of knowledge. The level 2 is the processes, which is described as the skills that the students use based on the facts and information for making meaning and understanding. And to assess this level of learning outcome, the sample guide question is, what do you want your students to do with what they know? And for example, dissect a frog and identify the different major body parts. For the third level of learning outcome, which is understanding, it is described as making meaning to big ideas and concepts. And to assess this level of learning outcome, the guide question is, what do you want students to understand? And An example of question or test item for this is, how do the elements of weather interact to produce a climate change? The fourth and last level of learning outcomes is product or performance. Products, which are materials, or performance, whether it is oral, visual, or written, or projects are evidences of learning. And to assess this learning outcome, the following are the guide questions. First, does your portfolio display evidence to show learning outcomes achieved? 2. Can you create a one-act play to show the principles of dramatization? And lastly, what research paper can you undergo to report on the conservation of indigenous plants? Now, let us know the different assessment tools for each level of learning outcomes. Knowledge, Process, Understanding, or KPU learning outcomes is students who can show that they have gained knowledge, can apply such knowledge, and have achieved several meanings on the particular knowledge, have achieved the learning outcomes. The three types of learning outcomes and on the different levels can be assessed in many ways with the use of appropriate tools. Let us now proceed to the types of tests to measure knowledge, process, and understanding. First, we have objective tests. These are the tests that require only one and one correct answer. It is difficult to construct, but it is easy to check. And in objective tests, there is pencil and paper test. As the name suggests, the test is written on paper and requires a pencil to write. However, in modern times, a pencil and paper test can also be translated to an electronic version, which makes the test paperless. There are different types of pencil and paper tests. The first one is simple recall. This is the most common tool to measure knowledge. There are varieties of simple recall tests to include fill in the blanks, enumeration, identification, and simple recall. The simple recall test is here somewhat arbitrarily defined as one in which each item appears as a direct question, a stimulus word or phrase, or a specific direction. The response must be recalled by the pupil from his past experiences rather than merely identified from a list of suggested answers supplied by the teacher. The typical response to the simple recall item is short, preferably a single word or phrase. A simple recall question could be, what is the highest mountain? Or who is the father of psychoanalysis? So those are just examples of simple recall questions. Another one is the alternative response test. This is the type of paper and pencil test where two options or choices are provided. The items can be stated in a question or a statement form. And examples for this is the true or false or the yes or no question. And for true or false, the sample statement is the Philippine population has reached 1 million. True or false? And for yes or no, the sample question is, has the Philippine population reached 1 million? Yes or no? The third type of pencil and paper test is the multiple choice test. This is the type identified as the most versatile test type because it can measure a variety of learning outcomes. It consists of a problem and a list of suggested solutions. The incomplete statement or direct question is called STEM. The list of suggested solutions in words, numbers, symbols, or phrases are called the alternatives, options, or choices. And the correct alternative is called answer, while the remaining options or choices are called distractors or decoys. Some multiple choice items are presented with the stimulus material. Multiple choice test includes different types, and the first one is correct answer type. Other alternatives are clearly wrong, and only one is the correct answer. This can be constructed in either direct question or completion of the sentence. And for the direct question, the example is, What is not a member of ASEAN 2015 Economic Community? A. Vietnam, B. Korea, C. Malaysia, and D. Philippines. And the example of incomplete sentence is, a country in Southeast Asia which is not a member of the ASEAN 2015 Economic Community is blank. A. Vietnam, B. Korea, C. Malaysia, and D. Philippines. Another type is the best answer type. All the alternatives are correct, but only one is the best. An example for direct question is, what do progressive educators consider as the most important factor in the teaching-learning process? For incomplete sentence, according to progressive educators, the most important factor in the teaching-learning process is. Another pencil and paper test is the matching type test. The most common matching type test is made up of two parallel columns. The first column is the premise that presents the problem, and the second column provides the answer. There are many modified matching types as well. Matching type test is useful in measuring factual information as well as relationships between two things, ideas, or concepts. It reduces guessing to the minimum as compared to alternative response tests. Some of the relationships that can be matched are found in this matrix. Persons and their achievements. Dates and the historical events happened in that specific date. Terms and definitions. Principles and their illustrations. Parts and their functions. Machines and their uses, and lastly, disease and its causes. This type of test also includes two types, the perfect and imperfect matching type. First, we have perfect matching type. The number of premises in column A is less than the number of responses in column B. The response can only be used once. For example, in column A are popular descriptions of presidents during their term of office. Match them with the names of the Philippine presidents in column B. The other type is the imperfect matching type. The number of the premises in column A is not equal to the number of the responses in column B, or the other way around. The response or the premise can be used more than once. For example, in column A are names of well-known curriculum evaluators. Match them with the evaluation models they have been identified with in column B. You can use the letter once or more than once. That is all for the objective test. Now, let us proceed to the other type of test, which is subjective test. Learning outcomes which indicate learners' ability to originate and express ideas is difficult to test through objective type test. Hence, in subjective type test, answers through reflections, insights, and opinion can be given through essay. Essay test items allow students freedom of response. Students are free to select, relate, and present ideas in their own work. The type of answers would reflect the extent of learners' knowledge of the subject matter, ability to use higher order thinking skills, and express ideas in an accurate, creative, and appropriate language. There are two types of essay test. The first one is restricted response item. This is like an expanded form of short answer type objective test. There is limit on both the content, scope, and the form of student response. It is most useful in measuring learning outcomes that require the interpretation and application of data in a specific area. An assessment task is restricted in its response if it is highly specific and generally contains only one correct answer. The other type is the extended response item. The student is generally free to select any factual information that can help in organizing the response. The contents of an extended essay will depend on the analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and other higher order thinking skills of the test takers.
Types of essay that measure complex learning outcomes. So there are two types of essay test items, the restricted and extended response essay items. And for the first one, these are the examples of complex learning outcomes that can be measured, and it is the ability to explain cause and effect relationships, describe application of principles, formulate valid conclusion, enumerate and explain methods and procedure. And for the extended response essay items, the complex learning outcomes that can be measured is the ability to organize ideas, integrate learning, design an experiment, and evaluate the worth of ideas.
We are done with the different types of tests. Now I will discuss the performance assessment tools. Performance assessment, also known as alternative or authentic assessment, is a form of testing that requires students to perform a task rather than select an answer from a ready-made list. The first assessment tool is the checklist. It is a tool that consists of list of qualities that are expected to be observed as present or absent. The presence is to be marked check and the absence is marked X. This is a performance evaluation tool in which a series of questions is asked and the teacher may simply respond yes or no or simply mark check or X, which can fall into either the behavioral or the trait method or both. So this is the example of a checklist. The second type of performance tool is the rating scale. It is a tool that uses a scale in a number line as a basis to estimate the numerical value of a performance or a product. The value is easier to score if the points are in whole numbers. The most popular rating scale is called the Likert scale. The third and last performance assessment tool is the rubrics. Rubrics for portfolio. A portfolio is a compilation of the experiences as authentic learning outcomes presented with evidence and reflections. And to assess the total learning experiences as presented in a holistic package, an assessment tool called a rubric is utilized.
Let us discuss the levels of assessment for the levels of learning outcomes. Levels of assessment describe levels of the learning outcomes, which are first, knowledge, second, process or skills, and third, understanding, the products or performance. The levels of learning outcomes are also used to describe the levels of assessment. This table includes the levels of learning outcomes or assessment, what to test or assess, type of assessment, and the percentage of value in assessment. Placing value to assessment results from KPUP to written work, performance task, and quarterly exam. This is according to Department Order Number 8, Series of 2015. These are the components of summative assessment, their purposes, and when they are given. Let us proceed to the grades at the end of the school year and how these are computed. In kindergarten, the use of checklists, anecdotal records, and portfolios are used instead of numerical grades, which are based on the kindergarten curriculum guide. And in grade 1 to grade 10, the average of the quarter grades produces the end of the year grade, and the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all final grades by the total numbers of learning areas, and each learning has an equal weight. And in grade 11 and grade 12 or senior high, The average of quarterly grade produces the semester grade. The general average is computed by dividing the sum of all semestral final grades by the total number of learning areas and the senior high school grading components. Reporting summative grades by quarter or semester or end of the year. Interpretation of the numerical values for all subject areas is based on the minimum initial grade of 60, transmuted into an equivalent of 75 in the report card. The numerical grades are described in the different levels of proficiency in the different competencies set in the subject areas. So, grading practices should be so transparent that students can tell the teachers or the parents what grade they have received even before the teacher calculates it. Students receive timely feedback, allowing them to improve their performance on tests, projects, and assignments. Proficiency is documented proof that a student has attained the required level of skill and knowledge as defined by benchmarks. Either a student meets this requirement or the student falls short and must continue to work until they do. So, the 5 levels of proficiency are namely beginning, developing, approaching proficiency, proficient, and advanced. The level of proficiency will be based on the numerical grades earned by the students in a particular quarter and at the end of the school year. For the advanced level, the grading scale is from 90% and above. For proficient, 85% to 89%. While for approaching proficiency, the grading scale is 80% to 84%. And for the developing level, 75% to 79%. And for those who are in the beginning level, the grading scale is below and up to 74%. Take action. Activity 1. Giving an example. Give 2 test items that are appropriate for each level of learning outcomes. You can choose the type of test for knowledge, process, and understanding. This is my answer for activity 1. This is for the subject arts, and the topic that I chose is Arts of Southeast Asia, Crafts and Accessories and Body Ornamentation. For knowledge, I used enumeration and multiple choice type of test. And these are my examples of test items. Number 1, name the different countries in Southeast Asia. And number 2, it is a country in Southeast Asia which is famous for its arts and crafts. For the process learning outcome, these are the test items. 1. Choose one artwork from the country in Southeast Asia and recreate by correlating the art elements and processes of Southeast Asian art. And number 2, draw some fabric designs made in Southeast Asia. And for the understanding learning outcome, I used essay type of test. Question number 1. What Philippine artworks have similar characteristics with the artworks of other Southeast Asian countries? And number 2, how can you relate the art forms in the way of life of some Southeast Asian countries? Activity 2. Ask a teacher. Interview a teacher in basic education about how they assess learning and request some items for their assessment tools. So according to the teacher that I asked, learners are graded on written work, performance tasks, and quarterly assessment every quarter. These 3 are given specific percentage rates that vary according to the nature of the learning area. These are the activities that you should do, the self-check and the self-reflect.
This ends my presentation. I sincerely appreciate your attention today. Thank you and God bless.